All right. Well, thank you so much, Scott, and everybody for joining today and bearing with the technical difficulties. Uh, so this is, if you've seen any of them that I've done before, we do kind of have a Star Trek theme, given that we are the enterprise systems team. And this one, since we've had our eForms for a few years now, it is the next generation. We're still going boldly where no eForms gone before, especially in verification, but it is that next level up. How did we get here started? Um, very much thanks to all of those that went before with Paramount Pictures and the Star Trek theme. It fit in perfectly. Title IV verification, the final frontier. This is a case study of the ICC Enterprise Systems team. Its 4-month mission was to digitize all verification forms, to automatically update checklist item statuses and move attachments to ImageNow, and to boldly go where no verification eForm has gone before. When we first started looking at things, I think everybody would agree, you started your verification with paper, and obviously there were problems. And then COVID hit, and we had an even bigger problem that we couldn't get the paper to the students couldn't get the paper to us, and everything was just coming to a halt. We did find a solution called Leap File. It was a secure way for them to upload, but they couldn't see what they'd uploaded. They couldn't tell if it'd been submitted, if it was successful, where anything was at. We couldn't find things sometimes. They'd upload 12 of the same thing. It was more like Frogger trying to get across. And unfortunately, Frogger didn't make it a lot of times. So we really looked at what were those options. We knew that there was the vanilla delivered eForms through PeopleSoft, and we also had been looking at Gideon Taylor software, and it was thrown out. What about something else, Adobe eSign and such? We ended up and said, it's got to be GT. There was so much that GT had to offer to us, and it fit our needs, and it also included Parent Portal at that time, and that was a big, huge thing, was for our dependent people to be able to get those signatures on there. So our initial timeline, I had training, pardon me, the first week, the first time ever, that week-long training was November 30th. And I started all my planning and how do I want to take these PDFs and turn them into GTE forms electronically. January of 21, the rest of my enterprise team that I work with was able to get the rest of that week-long training. And then we actually started working on the eForms. We went live on April 1st of that year. That was a bit of a crazy timeline. Partway along, we found a tribble called, what are you going to do about the prior year? You're still finishing that one. It's great that you want to start on eForms, but if you continue the other end on paper, it's going to be a massive issue. So we ended up in mid-project had to build out both aid years. But we were successful. We made it, and it launched live on April Fool's Day. No kidding. Where we are at now, we have had our forms for 5 years. We have roughly 168 eForms in the financial aid side. And most of that is because right now there is no cloning ability or copying roll forward within the GT eForms. But when you start building them and you see just how many pieces there are, you start to understand why it is not an easy task to just copy that. You do want to build it out again. And we have also used those opportunities each year as new features come along that we are able to then go ahead and put those in each year, which you would have to do then as a rebuild anyway. So that's why so many forms. It's the same basic, about 30 to 40. Some years we've gotten as little as around 20, but that's why so many of them. Our student finance has used one to create a bookstore charge request, and it has worked wonderfully. That actually has the automatic, as long as they're accepting that standard offer of how much money, it automatically completes itself. So the staff aren't having to go in and hit accept for the standard so many times now. They're ecstatic about that. We have had a veterans eForm out there. We are doing some of those major upgrades to take advantage of the helium things, which I will be talking about in a bit. And we also have a couple of different eForms and records that we've been trying to get out the door, but other things have been coming in the way. A few of those tiny little rifts in the universe that have come along. There was the major upgrade for helium, so we needed to learn what are those new tools and how can we use them. Where are they? They're all configuration, that's great, but where are they and how do you configure them? We also had a tools upgrade for us internally, PeopleSoft tools, and there was this little thing called age year 25, maybe you've heard there was congressional hearings and such about it now. It's not been pretty. And thank you to Jessica Holler for making those pins and giving them out to a bunch of Hug members. It, it, it has been a Survive 25 experience. But with that helium, what happened? It allowed us to take all of these dangling, oh, if only you could do's and make them so. It streamlined the forms a lot. We were able to add those on-page validations rather than having to have somebody configure it in an app engine. You can use the visual if statements to be able to create them yourself on the page. And we're also able then to pull in a lot of pre-population. If the data exists already in our PeopleSoft system, we can just go ahead and pre-populate it. Students do not have to re-enter their date of birth, their name, their address. We can show them what we already have. So one of the big major things when you talk about verification is that V1, V4, V5, dependent, independent, 6 different forms. And it's somewhat difficult to put that on a piece of paper. Sometimes it leads to additional pages. And then you have to make sure that they have zeros or dashes or NA or something in every single one of those buckets. And that can get pretty hard. So we had already started by driving a bunch of the visual if statements for if they're dependent, show them this one. And we could put the wording in there that was specific to that. With the changes to age year 25, we actually did not have to have a full-on verification form for our V4s. They still have to do an identity statement, but we're handling that outside of this form. So this form actually came down to just household size. We also had started with the statement of income and, did you earn? And if yes, then fill in this chart. We realized with the latest of the regs that we got our hands on then, that wasn't actually required quite the same way. As long as they use the DDX, we're good. We can just move on. We need that household size. If they did not use DDX, we're going to be requesting transcripts. But we've got the text transcript. We've got the information. We don't really have to make that student fill out this chart about income here. So we were able to get that part totally off. And then you do see some of these are blue for the visual ifs and some are white. The blue means that there's some statement behind that to say, do only show this page if this circumstance exists. So that was able to drive a whole lot of these things. So it is still a very big form, don't get me wrong, but we were able to get actually some simplification out of it. So it was a win. And some of those things have been, how can you nest all of these if then else? It's logic statements. At the very bottom, you're going to see those individual fields and they're equal to what value. You're able to group them together in groups and you're able to group groups on groups. So you can have as many layers as you need. And that's what we see from a setup standpoint that can look almost a little overwhelming. But what it drives then is the students able to see a slightly smaller picture than I had intended, but it does let them see just that page. And it's the page they needed to see rather than every single page and them having to say, oh, no, that one does not apply to me. Here's why, and be able to move on. They just see what they need. We also, as part of that, use yes, no drop downs to actually show, okay, if you say that, no, I don't have any others in the household, there's nothing else on that page. You just go right into the total. But if you say yes, then you actually see that field, those fields show up that grid so that they can add that information for those. And we'll talk a little bit more then on these on-page errors. Everybody wanted to be able to see not just the error, but the text, where does it go to? What field is it on? And that now has been granted. This is one of those amazing things that you just blink your eyes and suddenly you have a validation on the page. So you're able to, through the setup, that's what I'm showing here, you're able to say, okay, I want the specific wording of whatever, and then use that visual if to say, what's the situation that I want this to appear for, and then is it when they leave the page? Is it when they leave a field? Is it if they're taking an action, clicking a button? So you're really able to do that. And this is where, again, you can have the nesting of groups and fields within and just go to town on getting all the different ways possible to show that on-page validation. And you, the analyst, can do this through setup. You don't have to write code anymore, which is wonderful. So there is something to be thought of here, though. We did run into some problems. When you have on-page validations, you might say run it both ways. If you have it on leaving the page, certainly they think everything was fine, they went through, and then as they hit next, they're getting an error on the page. You may feel that's a little late to show the person the error. So if you put it on as they leave a field, if the field's required, it's going to have a populated value anyway. You can start seeing some slightly odd behavior. So you pick the least worst option that looks the best to you. In our case, it was that as they said yes or no, it immediately was triggering your household size is not correct because it's 0 or blank. And I was like, well, of course, they haven't even answered it yet. But the size and household is driving a bunch of visual ifs in the background by looking at the yes, no value and then how many other things were pre-populated. So we ended up and we chose to just leave it on there at the field level as well. But that's where play around with it. You're going to have to make a choice, figure out which one works best for you. And this is also where with those visual ifs, you can only show certain pages or certain parts just to the people who need it. So like for us, as they're going through this information for the contributor only appears to the contributor. As the student goes through, they don't see this. So they don't have to get confused about, wait a minute, there was something about a recycle and an approve button. All I've got is a submit. Hey, help desk, what's going on? They don't even see the information to be confused by it. Something else that we did, as you go through for the approvals, there's always that result page at the very end when you add or you're doing the evaluations, which is where our signatures end up falling for our contributors, is in that eval task. And at the end of that, it would show all this information. Things like the Opera ID, every single person who's in that approval queue. And it's like, that's more information than we really want them to see. So we created a cloaking device. And if you are a financial aid staff member who should see all of that, you will still see it. Otherwise, that's where we use the visual ifs on that custom segments section. That only shows if you're actually a financial aid staff member. Otherwise, those are false. And we created custom segments that will show based on what the form status is. So then there's if statements there to say, hey, when the form equals saved, give them a reminder that you do have to go ahead and come back in and actually submit this form. You haven't completed that. When they have sent it on its way and submitted it, if it's going directly to the financial aid staff, there's no contributor signature needed. Give them one message. If it is going to that contributor, give them a different one, and help them know what's going on. So for us, this is what it looks like from a setup standpoint, but what they're actually seeing is this. They still see all the same header that they normally would, but instead of just seeing this routing queue of list of Opera IDs and full names and everything, they get some information that's more useful to them as a student. So we found this has been very helpful for that, to give them what is that next step. And it also coincides with right then is when that checklist item status change is firing. So it's matching then what they saw on the screen here from words. If they go check their to-dos, they can now see that indeed those items have been updated. Absolutely amazing thing about the Helium was the drop downs. We can now do our own drop down values list, translate values and such ourselves. We don't have to type it all up, give it to a programmer who actually changes it and all. You can create it here. The drawback is, as far as I've been able to tell, these lists only exist within that form, within that specific segment. But I can easily create all of the yes, nos and such that I want. I'm not trying then to find still a single one, which I would have anyway. It would have been a list of me going every single field that I want a yes, no on, and them having to create that in the database. I'm able to do that step now myself through configuration. And if partway through I realize, oh, I don't want it to be FA, M, and O, I want it to be F, MO, and OT. I can change that on the fly. And then I have to go change it everywhere I used that in code for visual ifs and such. But I do have that power to be able to adapt as I need to. Signatures. For the most part, we use the comment box, so they actually are supposed to type their name rather than just slide. We do have a couple of situations where we've used the slide. And I've heard rumors that if you want to, There are some other options possibly out there for you. We haven't had a need to investigate them. So what we do is we have a custom segment and a custom page that we can put whatever verbiage we need to on here at the page level. We found that that message box was not very helpful. It doesn't have the HTML. That's a limitation of the PeopleSoft platform, not GT. But we could get around that by having the custom segment, whatever wording we needed to up top. Then we have that action items box they can type in. You're still going to see some verbiage or other from the message, and a note and a shout out to the programmers at GT for fixing this little bug. One of the tools updates when you would access these on your phone, it would actually say comments box for the signature and then comments again. And we had students so confused as to where they were supposed to put their signature, and that has now been fixed. So it will still resemble exactly this when they access it on their phone. And speaking of HTML, that is something that got snuck in, or I did not read my updates. That is now available. So we would do and include comments in the previous to when we had to recycle something, we'd send an email to the student and say, see the comments below. And they'd just be strung out in this fairly unreadable manner. But at least it was there. It was better than nothing. They have fixed that now being GT, and you can actually read the comment history now. So that is very exciting. Now that will still contain the Opera ID of whoever posted it, which is their name and such, but it is within the context of a comment, and there's not really a huge problem for a student, particularly seeing that. And it does help then if they're calling back into the help desk and such and saying, hey, I don't understand, so-and-so made this comment, but I don't know what that means. It helps immediately get to the person who should be directed since they already reviewed this. One of those things was the contributors this year. Now, when we first started the year, we thought that you were going to have all the contributors. If you had a dependent that's at some point in time had been married and they are living with two parents, you could have all three contributors and they would all three have to sign. So we actually built our contributor grid that way. We do plan to do some tweaks. Further clarification has since said if they're an independent, you do not have to have the spouse sign. And if they are a dependent, only one of the two parents has to sign. So we will be working on that. So if you see anything on here that you're like, they're requiring both, yes, we know, and we're going to work on that. But one caveat that you will want to know if you're going to do this sort of pre-populated grid, which is what this Kant grid is, you need a helper, which is where the Kant grid helper, who is always false, exists. It just is. You need one. Put it in there. You will be happy. You won't have tribbles. You'll have a grid that's pre-populated. And what that looks like, come on, is the ICER information is getting pulled directly off of the ICER records and then pre-populated in here. Most of that is now read-only. Then we're asking them, the student, to specifically provide an email. We've shown them what the email that was on the FAFSA for that contributor is, but if they need to change it, they can do so. It also then asks for a passphrase so that they have that. That is that combination of token that gets generated plus the passphrase actually lets the student in. Then we also created these resend emails and showing the status of the contributor. That way, when we had these multiples, the student would be able to see, parent 2 has not signed, but parent 1 has. I need to resend parent 1's. They lost the link. They are having some sort of problem, all those different things. So we created that for them to be able to see, and it works very well. This is kind of that layout that they get as the student when they're coming in. They're able to put that email address in. It was, again, a passphrase, and they can see, hey, this was unsigned at this point. And along that time, here's where when they come back in and it's not in recycled, it's just they're coming back in because they need to get that token out the door again. That's where then they'll see that resend email button. Speaking of buttons, the save button can be hidden. what the student doesn't see will save you on cleanup. I don't know about you, but our students have a habit of opening the eForm going, oh, I will do that later. Or this doesn't, I don't want to handle this right now. It doesn't apply to me, whatever. And they'll exit and it prompts them to save. And like good people, they hit save because that's what we've always been taught. If it asks you to save, make sure you do that. And so we have all these saved forms that were never even really started. So you are able now to click the little tiny word buttons right next to the deploy. It brings up this if then series, and you can select, like with the save, to put in an if statement that will always hide it on page 1, which then they can never ever see the save button on that page. And it will help a lot for them opening it and going, oh, no, not me, and not having saved just hanging out there and dangling. We also have the ability to see, as the evaluator, that staff member coming through, you can see who signed as what. And that helps you that you can match up, was this the student's name and was this the parent's name, or did the parent sign their name in both and all before you approve the form? Otherwise, you had to wait until the end and see that, or go into the admin tool. So this lets you see that within that flow in a more natural way. The contributor body, this is just a quick note of that link, click here to complete. That's how they get that token. It's an email that comes to them. It's not horribly complex. And we do have some built-in rules then about expiring old tokens and such as new ones are expired for security. We also, if you are on any of those sections that has that source in the upper left-hand corner, if you click that, you're able to then see the actual HTML. And I highlighted the little parts that I had to change. That lets you have any hyperlinks within your wording open in a new tab rather than taking over the eForm that the student's in, which could become very difficult to get back into. So I wanted to make sure that was there. And Scott, do we have time for me to buzz through the demo videos here?
I think you could at least start with, let's do a couple at least. I think we've got the time. Of
Okay.
course, people need to drop, they can drop. This is being recorded, so if you can't stay, feel free to, we'll get this sent out to everybody. So, but yeah, I'd love to give everybody a chance to see these in real life. Let's do it.
Okay, so this first one is the student themselves filling out that verification form. We have a standard on the front page that lists just their basic information. And then this is that actual form with some of those pre-populated values and the drop downs. So you can see how easy that is for them to get through. And if they say yes, boom, there's the grid for them to fill in. And if, oh, I actually don't have anybody there. And this is what I was talking about. They haven't even gotten to the total in household, but it's giving them fits. And there too, you saw if they put in a number that wasn't equal to them plus their 2 parents, it was telling them that's not okay. And then, the contributor, here's your emails. This is what I want to use. Because for testing purposes, I don't want to send it to these real life parents or, whoever was being used in those test ICERs. And it would be your prerogative whether you want the passphrase to be specifically different or whether they can reuse it. And this is our standard student signature page. So they type in their thing, and you can also control when and where those comments are already expanded so that it's easy for them to see those boxes. Okay, so that is the student portion.
Well, hey, Joanna, quick question somebody had.
Yeah.
They're wondering what version of GT you're using.
We are on the latest one, which I don't know the actual numbers. My apologies.
No.
But drop your email in there as well. We'll grab it and we'll be able to email back and answer specifically.
Awesome.
So then that generates an email off to a contributor, and this is what they see. They have to put that passphrase in from that link. They see that page that only they're going to get to see. If they want to click those hyperlinks, they can see them. And make sure you do them too, because you can find out that maybe a page moved. But again, there's no save button on here. So they just step through the form, they read along, make sure that everything their student entered was correct and they're okay with it. They can make comments if they see something off. And then they are able to sign. And again, it has that different header, it's a different page. And they're able to approve it. They could recycle if they saw a problem and go back through to the student then with their comments of, hey, this is what you messed up. And again, this is where that custom view of what did we want them to see rather than all the details.
Very cool. That latest edition version of GT is 3.58.3, everybody. There was another question quickly for you, Joanna. That
Hmm.
someone was wondering, were you exporting completed forms to ImageNow Perceptive?
Yes, we are.
Okay,
So the verification form will generate a PDF of all of those pages of information, and it has some headers that has the aid year and the MPL ID of the student. And yeah, when the staff member, the financial aid staff member, at the very end of that approval train hits approve for the last time, it will generate that PDF and send it over into ImageNow. We also have a couple of other forms, one of which I think I will be showing that it takes whatever is uploaded as a document and it will send that over. And we are getting to where we're combining them. We've got a couple of different forms that it would generate the PDF of what they actually filled out for answers, plus take whatever they attached and put them together as a single multi-page document over into ImageNow or Perceptive Content.
very cool. Kim has a question.
Mhm.
Does the link to resend the email generate a new token or the same?
New token, and we basically block the prior tokens for that very reason of security, that if they're floating around or you accidentally sent them to the wrong email, you've got that shut off.
Very cool. Another
And
question.
with that, I will
Oh,
go
go
ahead
ahead.
and show
Sorry.
real quick how that update token works. Student goes in for
Yeah,
recycle. This is what they're seeing. They can change that email, change that passphrase, and then it's as easy as them clicking the resend button, and it will generate that new token out to the parent.
very cool.
Yep.
Michael had a question about, he wanted to know, are you using the import agent email agent to place those? Or do you have a service using integration agent?
Make sure you put your email in there. I will also, at the very end, is a slide that contains a link to Matt. That is a technical question that I didn't
There you
have to
go.
do with setup. So
Cool.
that'll have to be answered after.
Okay,
I know
thank you.
that as far as what shows as email on FAFSA, that's just a direct pull like the names are. But
Right.
yeah, what they put in the bucket here for email to use now, I'm not sure.
Okay, yeah, Jay actually answered that and said that you guys are using the integration agent. There
Okay,
you go.
great. Thank you, Jay. Okay. How
Jay
quick and
for the
easy
win.
Yes, how quick and easy it is for a document upload. This is secure. They're in their portal. They've already logged in. You have that, open in the links opening in another tab, and then they can just click upload, choose what they want for a document. They can make some comments if they need to. They'll be able to change it out if they picked the wrong item. If they need to put multiples in there because maybe they had to take a picture of one page at a time and it's a 5-page document, they can put all that in there and it's not a problem whatsoever. They can view it, make sure that they have what they wanted, and then they hit submit. And that's all they have to do to get their document in. Take a picture on your phone potentially, and then fill this out on your phone and be able to attach it. Very simple. This was just me showing how you can actually replace them and swap them out.
Um, Karen wanted to know about, the question is, how about laser fish? I'm not sure I know how to answer that, but RJ says, in answer to that question, we don't have a configurable solution template for this one yet, but I'm sure an integration could be built.
Okay.
So there you go. Let's see, Santiago wondered, are you limiting the file types?
We have not. We have not had a problem with that, but I know it is an option. And if we were getting ones that were way too big, um, formats that were not
Yeah,
usable within, we would definitely be turning that on.
there you go. Okay. Well, other questions, folks, keep dropping these in.
Yep.
Joanna, how much more time do we have with you?
We got well, I've got as much as we need. I've got one,
Okay.
maybe two more uh, videos to show here about a couple of
Okay.
other different situations. This is our loan eForm. So they do have online accepting and declining their loans, but if they need to change the dollar amount, we direct them in here. We're pulling in a bunch of their NSLDS information so they can see that and kind of estimate what is the maximum I can take out this year. And it also has built-in logic then if they try and request more than that. And it also, these options here for cancel, decrease, apply, we've got those on-page visual ifs to help direct them to the correct choices that really do apply to them right now. We also, because a lot of our student population being we're a community college, they just want to cover their tuition bill. They're not
Yeah.
really needing that refund. So this also lets them easily do a drop down of, yep, that's all I want. And they don't have to do math either.
Very cool. If you want to keep going, I've got, looks like another at least three questions. I can
Go
wait, or
ahead.
want me to go ahead? Okay.
Yep.
One from Diana was, do you only have forms that are only one student at a time? What they're looking for are forms with multiple entries in one form that departments could complete.
We have only done one form for a student at a time, but I know that the capability is there to create these, that you could have multiple people creating it at the first play and then going through. Our situations have been student starts it and then it can go to some different pathways, ultimately ending at a specific department pool.
Okay. Peter wanted to know what happens to form data after the form is executed. Do you process it into PeopleSoft apps?
Right now, we haven't. The majority of our forms are document uploads. So it's just making sure we had to get their tax transcript and we've got it. Their statement of uh, proof of citizenship, they provided the
Got it.
passport picture, that kind of stuff. We are looking that as part of that veterans changeover is we wrote the form itself so that it matches the summary page in PeopleSoft exactly. And that is one of those automations we want to do is when the staff member hits approve, boom, page is created. We were going to do that with actual verification this year, but with all the changes, that was a bridge too far.
Got it. Let's see, last question I've got right now, maybe some more coming through, but this one from Santiago again was about, are you keeping everything stored in PeopleSoft or are you sending things to storage documentation software like OnBase?
We are using ImageNow or Perceptive Content, depending on which version you're on. They're the same thing, but different branding at different times. We are using any documents that have come in and are approved. They get sent off to ImageNow and deleted out of our system for that reason of storage. Now,
Got it.
we technically have not done that if a student withdraws or we deny the form. We're still leaving it in there, but right now we've maybe had a dozen that we've withdrawn or denied in that way. So it's not a big deal for
Yeah.
us for those.
Okay.
All
Did you
right.
have, I think you had at least another video. Do you want to show
Yes.
that? Okay.
This is one that combines everything together into one form. You've got questions and answers up top that you had to put at least one of them in. So you've got, on-page validations, you've got questions, you've got a comment box that they could be required to specifically provide further explanation in. They've also got a document upload going. And they also then have a signature on the next page, which that is a change. Prior versions to Helium, you had issues that the attachment box would kind of float all over. And like originally, it floated to the middle between action items, put your upload in here, then sign. And it was very awkward. So this now you can configure it and keep it all straight to each page like you want. So that was the end of my slide deck. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. This is our contact information. Leave that up there for just a little bit. You can grab a screenshot, if nothing else, of that right here, right now. And if you've got any more questions, Scott, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and advance and let you do your closeout business.
Yeah, right now I don't, but
Okay.
wow, what a fun presentation. Joanna, you are always so good to us and to this community. I know people really appreciate not just your expertise, but your willingness to be helpful and such a good listener. And so we're just thrilled to have this chance to share today. If everybody got something out of this, I think you did. And again, we have recorded it. We'll be sending out this recording along with the slide deck, so you can go through and get notes from all that. Share with your teams. Feel free to do that. We're trying to do this every month. We've got these scheduled through, I think, well into the summer, maybe even up to as late as September. Next month, we're going to be having our friends from the College of the Holy Cross sharing some really cool things they've done with their new language placement, eForm. They've actually got a way for students to go through and if they say they want to take a language, this form lets them do an evaluation of that. And it's been really cool, really innovative. And so we sent out a link to register for that. If you put this on your calendar, we'll get more information out to everybody. But again, just so grateful we could be with everybody today. And feel free to hit us up with any questions you might have. Last slide there is our Senior Business Development VP, Scott Anton. Many of you know Scott, a great friend of our community. reach out to him with any additional questions. There's his phone number and email. We're here for you folks. We'd love to be helpful. And that's the goal, is to make sure that we're helping everybody achieve their goals. So with that, I don't have any other questions that I see. So Joanna, I think you did it. We survived. Everybody have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes, thank you again. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.